Good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome to Kaizen Central this week. I'm delighted to see you. And as always, just going to allow people to join up as they come along. The waiting room is flooding with people even as we speak. Great to see Anton here, and absolutely, Angela, thank you so much for introducing us. It was very, very good of you. And I'm very much looking forward to Anton bringing us some pretty solid insights into some of the things that have been going on in the export trade business. We also have a new person joining us, Mark Wood, who's just coming on stream now. Absolutely delighted to see Mark. John, lovely to see you again. Alec, I'm enjoying your backgrounds. They look increased. They look more and more exotic as time goes by.
I'll fade up with the beat.
Okay. All right. We're getting close to quorum. Good evening, Mike. Nice to see you. Right. Mark Wood, a very warm welcome to the first one of these. Just to say that Anton Gunter is our guest today. He's going to be talking to us and fielding questions and offering suggestions about the teething problems, the government calls them, around trade and export post Jan 1, obviously, particularly to the EU. Let's get cracking. I think there'll be some more people coming in, but let's get going as we speak. Anton, a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Can you perhaps just tell us who you are, what your company does, just so we get some context around that, please?
Yeah, so my name is Anton Gunter. I'm the Managing Director of Global Freight Services. We're a multimodal freight forwarding company dealing with imports, exports, cross-trade, both locally, nationally, and internationally, and obviously now dealing with a lot of inquiries for Europe. Company's 25 years this year, 25 years old this year, and we continue to help small to medium-sized businesses sort of fulfill their international ambitions and take away the headache of Brexit.
Take away the headache of Brexit. Well, I mean, that sounds like a nice strap line. We take away the headache of Brexit. Some people, the pain is not necessarily in their head, it's in another part of the body. But there we go. So, Anton, okay, let's start off with, let's sort some wheat from the chaff, because there's been an awful lot of hot and heavy reaction to what's been going on after January the 1st. I myself have interviewed a South African chap who runs a company in the West Midlands who was screaming about what was going on post-Brexit. And he's one of those companies that's now says he's opening a distribution facility on the continent because he just can't bear what's going on with export as it currently stands. Now, let's take that one. Companies say they're setting up in Europe, or on the continent rather, because they just can't manage the government's IT system for getting goods exported to the EU. Is it a fair comment? Is it a fair reaction?
I think what's important to realize, and as we speak this evening, I'm hoping to sort of bring positivity around the whole Brexit leaving of the EU's exit, the UK's exit from the EU. And I think the first starting point is if we drop the word Brexit and we just talk about the UK's exit, because that makes people a little bit more positive. It is fair to say that there's been teething problems in terms of transport, logistics, customs clearance. But I think the one thing that has stood up is actually the HMRC's export system. In other words, when we do an export declaration, we've seen no problems with anything when it comes to actually inputting the data into the system and then generating the necessary documentation. I think where the problem has lied, and it's not, I'm not going to say everyone or people haven't been prepared, because people have been preparing, but it might be that they've been preparing in the wrong area. So, for example, we very often will have a look at people's commercial invoices, which is paramount to the whole transaction. The information that is contained in that document or in the commercial invoice is different to what you would normally send over to Europe. So when you're finding that there's a delay in a customs entry or an exit entry, then you normally find that there's information that's not present on that commercial invoice that will be necessary for the export clearance. And then again, when it arrives in the UK or into France, it's then, let's say, for example, it's missing for their import clearance. So I think it's fair to say there have been delays, but the one thing I will say is that actually HMRC's system for export clearances, we certainly haven't seen any problems that would make me want to leave the UK and go live in Europe.
Well, that's good to hear. Mark, who's one of our member who can't make it here tonight from Plus Sensors.
I spoke to him this morning.
Yeah, as you know, I forwarded you a letter from him, an email from him, who's saying he's getting terrible delays and headaches exporting, as it now is, into Northern Ireland. What were you able to glean from what he said, and why he's having such delays when you're saying other people aren't?
Yeah, so we need to distinguish between the delays that I'm talking about, which is the export clearances or the old NES, what they call NES entries. He's having problems with actually setting up an entity over in Northern Ireland. So his idea, or what he's going to be doing is he's setting up a company over in Northern Ireland to then ship directly from the continent to Europe. So when I spoke to him this morning, the difference being is he's waiting for things like VAT numbers. He's waiting for the setting up of the company. Now, we're expecting that HMRC won't be able to keep up with the amount of VAT inquiries, with the amount of customers now setting up new businesses in various parts of the UK. So I think it's really important to distinguish between Mark's problem, which is HMRC on a administrative level, and then the actual process of exporting and importing to Europe.
Okay, well, thank you. I didn't realize that, of course, I suppose a lot of UK exporters must be doing precisely that, setting up in Northern Ireland, and perhaps bypassing, setting up a bridge into Northern Ireland, avoiding UK to get around that. Anybody got any thoughts? Who amongst us have got experience of exporting? Alec, obviously. Lee, very interesting last week that you were talking about getting some assistance to increase your exporting. Perhaps you'd like to kick off. Alec, what are your thoughts? Have you had any problems since January the 1st? And if so, what do they look like?
Yes and yes. Only not serious stuff, but we had an order that we placed from Logitech in Ireland that was stuck. I think it was stuck from the 14th of January to when we cancelled it last week. It was stuck in Eindhoven. I hadn't got out of Eindhoven, and they just kept rolling back the delivery dates, and it was just Brexit delays. And then I'm just trying to ship some rice samples, 1.5 kilos of rice samples to AB InBev in Belgium. I've just printed off 10 sheets of paper for it's got no value, and I've got absolutely zero confidence it's actually going to get there, because I don't have the EORI number for AB InBev and I don't have the VAT number, and the whole system just seems overly complicated. And I guess for Anton, if we were shipping a $100,000 satellite from Roy, it's worth doing the paperwork. But for a lot of companies are doing, these are insignificant transactions, but there's lots of them.
First thing I would say, Alex, sorry to interrupt you there. One thing I will say is never think that your transaction is too small. We're a freight forwarder. Our business is to help people like yourself do importing and exporting. So I would certainly invite you to contact us and let's have a chat. But what I would say though is it's not the important thing is the paper, your initial paperwork, and that's sometimes just needs a little bit of tweaking. Your commercial invoice are your goods subject to any veterinary inspections?
No, it's milled rice. It's just raw rice. But the last thing after you've paid your money and you've got your documents it says don't send any food.
And
so
how are you sending it? How are you currently sending it?
The one that didn't get here was UPS, and this one's going out in Royal Mail. I figured mail might work better than than UPS was working.
So we do know that unfortunately both UPS and DHL, two of the world's largest couriers, are having extreme problems. There are other options available. In terms of you say the order was stuck in, was it Eindhoven?
I think it was Eindhoven, yeah.
And where was it coming from? In other words, what was the route of?
I guess it was coming from a warehouse in Holland. I'd ordered it in Ireland through Logitech in Ireland. So why it was coming from Holland, I have no idea. But that's the modern world, isn't it?
So I think the important thing to when you look at the whole process, try and simplify the process. And this is where we're certainly finding a lot of our customers are having problems, not with their own process, but the Europeans. It's almost like they don't want this to work, and they're going to do everything they can. What I would say though is it's speaking to your supplier and understanding who's the importer, who's the exporter of record, and who's the importer of record. It might be stuck in Eindhoven, you say, in a customs warehouse because actually no one's doing the export clearance. So it also depends on that bad word called Incoterms. It depends on who's what term are you actually buying the goods under. Do you know which term you're buying the goods under?
It's just a normal transaction. I mean, we just bought, it's a webcam I'm using now. I tried to buy it direct from Logitech. I cancelled my order, got a refund. I ordered it on Amazon. It was here next day and it was 40 quid cheaper. So the world's gone completely bloody bonkers,
Yeah. I think it's just the couriers are having a problem. I know DHL have stopped their services to and from Germany because they don't have the ability. Now, we've had 4 years to prepare, and it feels like the UK has been preparing for all of that time. But it does feel a little bit like Europe sort of thought maybe it won't happen. I don't think the excuse that a lot of people use that they were waiting to see whether we had a deal or no deal, because the process, which we always talk about, is exactly the same. The only thing that would have been different if we didn't have a deal is that we'd pay duty as opposed to everything potentially being duty free.
But I think the challenge for smaller companies, I mean, again, if we're going to ship machines over to India shortly, but that's a different level of transaction. You expect to have some cost in that, but if we were to use you to ship a sample to Belgium, what does that do to our cost base? I mean, I'm guessing it's more than 30 quid to send it on the postal service.
What machines do you manufacture?
We make rice milling machines.
Okay, so imagine the corner shop in your local street started manufacturing the same machine. Would you buy it from them? Would you buy it from someone that actually does the job? Now, unfortunately, you're right. There are cost implications. I wouldn't send something with Royal Mail to South Africa because the process, they wouldn't be able to deal with the process. And the part of that I normally think about is that if you're going to send something with Royal Mail, if something goes wrong, who do you contact and how do you sort it out? And so, there are various ways of looking at cost. It depends on the size. We would probably use a courier option. And generally speaking, depending on the address, I would probably say between 30 and 50 pounds would be the cost for that. The one thing I'd say though, and I'm not just going to sell my service, but any freight forwarder, any courier company, at least you've got a starting point and an ending point. And if something gets stuck in the Netherlands or Belgium or wherever, we know who to speak to. And I think that's the problem with Royal Mail is that, the postman who delivers isn't the person who can do customs clearance. So you're not sure exactly where's the process broken down.
I think actually looking at the way bills, it's FedEx that doing the custom clearance because it's not Royal Mail that does it. They use FedEx.
No, more than likely. But again, you'll have to work through Royal Mail, and with all the best will in the world, trying to speak to Royal Mail with a local delivery is hard enough. If you then have a international transaction, certainly it is better not to use Royal Mail. There are other better options, and I'm more than happy to, like I say, I keep saying, to ring us. We genuinely do work on the basis that nothing is too big, nothing is too small, and because your one sample today is machines to India, which makes me smile even more. So, there is synergy to say, well, we'll help you with something small, but if we can have those Indian machines, that's where the profitability comes in.
Yeah. Okay. If it's not there on Monday, I'll give you a call.
Perfect.
Anybody else got any thoughts or questions for Anton?
I need Alec to tell me how to build the £100,000 satellite, because I'll make a killing.
And when he does, I'll ship it. We'll all benefit.
Sorry, was that? Did I miss a zero out, Roy?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Or maybe 2 or 3.
Actually, 2 zeros, I think. Yeah, I think. Fantastic. As a matter of interest, Roy, matter of interest. I mean, you when you ship, something like the Eurostar Neo from Stevenage or from Pompey over to Toulouse for testing, is that treated as an export? Or is it an intra-company transfer or what?
No. We actually use the company we use is Laser International, and they do all the organisation. So yes, we need export documentation. We need safety documentation, but it's a 0 rated item because it's in terms of duty, because it's aerospace. And although it is export, it's not export with the final destination, because the final destination is space, and nobody's figured out how to tax space yet. They will. So we're kind of, everything's exempt for us, but we need all the paperwork to say it's exempt. So, but we use a freight forwarder, and transport logistics company that does all that for us.
It's quite interesting because when the guys came back from the moon landing, there was actually a customs declaration done on the goods that they brought back from the moon. So before we talk about space not being taxed, they are watching it very closely.
Oh, yeah. If we start mining the moon or Mars, then I expect they'll definitely want to start taxing something.
Coming close from a HMRC agent.
Lee, good evening. You had a question for Anton, I believe, or an observation. No sound, Lee.
I'm on mute. How about now?
Yeah, good.
I did it on the screen, but I forgot my fancy headphones. This morning, I was on a webinar with Exporting is Great, and Department of the
DTI.
Industry and Trade again, the DTI, for exporting into defense and security markets within certain countries within Europe. I think it was the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland. And there's huge opportunities here across the board, from a pair of boots to arms to clothes, you name it, everything is required. One of the big interesting things from a manufacturer's point of view is the big things were cybersecurity, UAVs, unmanned things, autonomy, and it seemed to be growing. But the point I'm making in regards to Anton is they were talking about exporting and the hassles that have been a few companies have had, shall we say. Now, there is confusion. Now, on the dit.gov site, the biggest problem is there are certain codes for certain products.
HS codes.
Yes. I'm not an exporter. I'm not familiar, so forgive me if I'm going the wrong way. But my understanding is that if you were to contact the DIT, Department of International Trade, they will put you in touch with a relevant person that will help you with your export papers and to put the right codes in. Now, going back to Roy's point, which involves me, because I'm a subcontractor of parts that end up going here, there, and everywhere around the world. And my problem that I'm trying to get over is it's all about origin of source. And where the
rule of origin, right?
Rule of origin.
Rule of origin.
There's a certain percentage that has to be done in a certain country that makes it the rule of origin. So if I'm only making 5% of one of Roy's satellites, that I'm exempt. But if I'm making, I can't remember what the threshold is, ladies and gentlemen. But the bottom line is there is help to be had with codes and exporting from the DIT. And I'm absolutely flummoxed and discombobulated, to be perfectly honest, from a government organization. They have been, it's a breath of fresh air. It really is. I was talking to my local rep, and the reason for that is they've stopped employing civil servants. So my international trade advisor is from industry. She is not a civil servant. And they just seem to be, well, the bottom line is they get paid on our results. So she gets a commission if I export and I sell. Boom. So there's funding to be had as well, ladies and gentlemen. There's up to £9,000 matched funding to help. So if you spend 18 grand, whether that's digital marketing, your website, anything, because they're from industry and they will help you word it to tick the boxes, it's match funding up to £9,000. So I'm applying for a grant.
Last week, Lee mentioned this in a slightly different context and put some contact names and addresses out there. I've got them on the chat file from last week's meeting. So I'll send those names and addresses out just in case they're of any assistance. And I'm sure if they're not relevant to your particular area of the country, you can extrapolate from the web address what works for you. John Hardwick, you work with a lot of manufacturers, and I'm just wondering if you've got any observations or had any feedback from your network about some of the issues around exporting and trade post January 1.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I work for the Manufacturers Alliance, and we're a networking group for SME manufacturers in the Northwest. So have a lot of contact with manufacturers who are, some of whom are exporters or now find themselves as exporters, dealing with Europe and Northern Ireland. And yeah, the one issue that seems to be coming up a lot with some of my members is actually where things are going groupage. You know, a lot of them are sending items that don't warrant their own transport, so they go groupage. And so although they've got all the documentation right, they're getting some holdups at the borders, both in the UK and in Europe. And I'm just wondering what the answer to that is. You know, you can understand that if everybody's is on the learning curve, then those who are ahead of the curve are being dragged back by those who are still coming up the curve. But I just wonder if the carriers themselves should be doing more and making sure that if they're doing stuff for groupage, that every single package they're transporting has the correct documentation. Otherwise, it's it's holding back everybody else.
John, I'm pleased to say that actually that's not a Brexit issue. That's been an issue in international trade for years and years and years. And when I say that, it's because if you do a grouped container from India, for example, and you've got 3 or 4 people that are not customs clearing, you can experience delays that way. Normally, the difference between road freight and container shipping, obviously, I recently started to understand how Europe works, and unlike in the UK, where I can sit in Telford and I can do a customs clearance for something coming into Felixstowe. If you, for example, ship to the Netherlands, the vehicle has to go to a customs house or a customs broker. So if you have a vehicle with 7 loads or 7 consignments or 7 people's goods on it, they may need to stop at 7 different locations. They have to go in, because what happens is, because there's no borders as such in Europe, they have to be inspected. So they'll go to a customs house, they'll wait for maybe 3 hours whilst the goods are then inspected and then cleared. And that has to happen 7 times before they can actually do the delivery. Unfortunately, hauliers should be checking paperwork, but because they might not be doing everything, in other words, they might not be doing the export clearance, they might not be doing the import clearance, it's largely out of their hands in terms of being able to speed the process up. So unfortunately, those delays, until the systems work themselves out and until Europe becomes a little bit more automated, they're going to persist. You ask about, what can they do to speed things up, is look at make sure their paperwork is correct, speak to the haulier that they're using and finding out, do they offer a customs brokerage over in Europe? And 9 times out of 10, it might be quicker if the haulier, let's say there's 7 loads and they're doing all 7 loads, then they can go to one place and they can do customs clearance. Until everybody buys into that process, you're always going to find people who can have their customs clearances done cheaper by someone else, by a friend, etc. So unfortunately, if you're going to use a grouped or shared vehicle, you are going to experience those delays for a little while longer. We're trying to get customers to send bigger loads. So in other words, if it has to be 1 load per week, that's fine. But can you maybe send 7 pallets and make up a bigger proportion of the vehicle? And then that means obviously your loads, it's the relationship too between you as the customer and your haulier. And it's making sure that they're up to speed, because we are finding that a lot of hauliers are using European hauliers to take the freight back again, which makes sense because the haulier comes over with the load and goes back with the load, but they're not as prepared as we are. And so it is vitally important that I think to sort of taper people's expectations of time. If something took a week to get to France, it's now taking 10 days to get to France. It will speed up.
If you try and then put a bigger load, that has another lead time penalty because you ship every 2 weeks instead of every week. And so, yeah, that 10 days then becomes 21 days, and then you start losing competitive advantage. So, it's causing a lot of frustration.
Yeah, and unfortunately, on imports coming in from Europe, I have no better news, because as of the 1st of July, the border's effectively closed. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but we've had certain steps in the process where we've had the government has made it easier. So, for example, if you're importing from Europe at the moment, your vehicle more than likely comes straight to your warehouse without you doing customs clearance. They're trying to alleviate pressure on the borders. What I would say, though, is that as of the 1st of July, the border effectively comes down and customs clearance has to be done before the goods are then entered into the UK. I wish the government would bring that back or bring it closer to, maybe the end of March, because at the moment we've got European hauliers turning up with no paperwork and just saying, yeah, here's your goods, customs clear it. And we can't customs because we've got no paperwork. So I think it's important that relationship between the haulier and the customer, because the delays are being caught. If you're using a larger haulier, they may take it into a hub, which means that individual consignments can be cleared. If they're using a smaller haulier, they may be delivering on the vehicle that's actually transporting it, which means that you're going to experience delays. But I would certainly say what you need to do is the people who are experiencing those is talk to the haulier and find out what are their timescales and what do they build in for customs clearance. But it is once we get, the other thing is a mindset. Once we get a head around the fact that we can no longer quickly send a pallet to France, people will get used to the sort of longer timescales, and actually they'll stop talking about it as a delay rather than a transit time. We know that, for example, we allow 3 to 5 days for anything coming into the UK from abroad, let's say from Australia, for customs clearance and final delivery. And that's going to be the same process going into Europe. We need to also understand that Europe is now an international country and we're no longer part of it. So so the process that we now do are going to become the normal. And what we see now as delays are actually going to be the normal transit.
So what are the implications for manufacturers, Ewan?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just interesting. So, I mean, it's part of the challenge, let's say, that we need to get into a different mindset, which is rather than sort of thinking, well, how do we improve the efficiency of the current situation? Actually, because we're thinking that things will go back to how they were, but actually what you're saying there, Anton, is never going to go back to, it's fundamentally changed. And unfortunately, we just have to basically suck it up, and things will take longer, things will cost more, and that's just going to be the way it is.
Unfortunately, that vote to leave did exactly that. It meant that, forevermore, the process of moving something to and from Europe is going to change. If you're regularly importing from China, for example, you know that it takes 40 days to get to it takes 40 days to get from China to the UK, and then we allow 3 or 5 days for customs clearance and delivery. So it is a mindset change. We do need to get used to the fact that there's an export clearance which needs to be done, and there's an import clearance that needs to be done. The other thing I'd also say, John, is that things that could cause delays is who's actually doing the customs clearance, but also who's paying the duty over in Europe. We are finding that the Europeans are taking a long while to actually put their hand in their pocket and pay for the duties and taxes. And so that can also be causing delays, not necessarily that it's the haulier or the paperwork or the process, but the actual final act of paying the duties and taxes, that can also be causing delays. I think, Ewan, to come back to your point, it's the new norm, as they say. It is now, this is what but once everyone gets their head around that process, we can't make it any more efficient other than computerizing Europe. Once we can computerize Europe, the other issue we have at present is that a lot of the ports are not inventory linked. So inventory linked means that, for example, if a container comes in from South Africa into Felixstowe, there is a computer system that has that container on it. And so we know that when it's arrived and we can do customs clearance. But at the moment, for somewhere like Dover, for example, there is nothing checking vehicles. So although we do a customs clearance attached to a vehicle registration, there is actually no system, no AMPR, no physical checks that are putting a number plate or registration number to an export declaration. So we're having to physically, manually do the initial customs entry. And then when the goods actually arrive at final destination, we're then having to input or to manually arrive the goods, which normally happens automatically. So when you say, can we improve the situation? I think we can improve the situation on imports, but I'm not so sure about exports.
And sorry, just improve on imports, because in effect, we are in control of that process. Whereas obviously we can't on exports because we're reliant on a third party country improving, in effect, their systems and processes.
Yes, yeah. So like I say, if you do a container from South Africa, it's all automated. Every step of the customs clearance process is automated, other than obviously physical checks or documentation checks. At present, vehicles driving through Dover, there is no checks. In other words, there is border force. They're checking the vehicles for stowaways or that the products are correct. But a lot of the vehicles are simply driving through with no customs clearances having been done on them. They're arriving at destination, and we're getting frantic phone calls from customers saying, oh, this has arrived, we need to customs clear it. So until, I think it's Dover, Dover is working on some form of system, which I think will turn into an AMPR system where it does vehicle or number plate recognition and then attaches customs clearances to those. But then again, it also belies the fact that, as John mentioned earlier, that if you've got a shared vehicle, that every single person has to have done customs clearance. So it is a case that, unfortunately, we're also reliant on other people doing their bit.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Anton that it may be deeply unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, if ever. And the most efficient thing to do for all our sakes is to make it work as best as we possibly can. And so that's why I really appreciate Anton's advice on this. Anybody else got any thoughts, worries, whinges, whatever, or positive things about what's been going on to throw onto the table?
Just before Simon speaks, did anyone notice that the EU hasn't actually ratified the trade deal yet? They've asked for an extension to the trade deal, or to the inspection timescales. So we're sitting here going, this is the process, this is great, we're working really well, and they haven't actually agreed it. They haven't been able to get all the member states together to actually get it agreed.
Okay.
So what's the news?
Interesting observation.
I actually had a positive observation from this week. As most of you know, I'm involved in the data business, and the European data authorities this week made a decision that said that the current law within the UK is sufficient to meet the needs for GDPR, which means that there will not be any significant change in the ability to move data from the UK into the EU.
Wow. Okay, that's actually
Which is
very
basically, which is basically very, very good news, because it's one of those things that could have gone the other way, but the wording of the ruling is very important, because it basically says that the current UK law meets the standards, but of course the government has said that they have the intention over time of changing UK law, which of course would mean that there would be a further review with Europe. But at the moment, moving data around remains pretty much the same as it was before.
Yeah, because the UK law is basically enshrining GDPR into statute. So there's no way that it would vary. I would think it would be very hard for the Europeans to justify, or the EU to justify, saying that it wasn't sufficiently in sync, because basically it mirrors exactly what they currently do themselves. But the fact that it's happened is good news. I think we're all worried about the politics creeping into this, and causing some large amounts of grit to get into the wheels of commerce. One of
the other things that just a quick one. One of the other things that has changed quite significantly is the ability of UK-based consultants to work in Europe. The nature of their organisations has had to change, so that they can have people who live in the UK but work on projects that are generating income in the EU. That is having a fairly significant impact.
We have some of those here amongst us. They dwell among us. Who knew about this? How does this work for you, Steve? Because you've got European clients, continental European clients, haven't you?
I've not been able to work it out yet. Like I say, last week I was going round and round and round in the government website. So it's one of the things that I still have as I need to find out about. I think to an extent, I think I'll be all right, because I'm not like a doctor, so I'm not going to be actually operating on people or anything like that.
Thank God.
But I haven't. That's good. Yeah, that's good. I would to be operated on by me, and the continuous improvement, like qualifications, aren't as rigorously applied as things like accounting qualifications and things. So I think I'll probably be all right, but I think there will be things like taxation and VAT implications and things like that I still haven't found out yet, all the detail, and I probably keep trying. But if Simon's got anything that clarifies the situation, great. I don't know if you could say, Simon, but do you know what the situation is, or?
It's all about the local ruling as to where your work is completed, where the value is generated, and where you get paid. I don't have a problem from the US, for example. I do a lot of work in Europe, but all of it is billed and paid through my US limited company. So as far as the French authorities and German authorities are concerned, for example, I don't actually get paid any money at all in Europe or Germany, even if I'm sitting in France doing my work, because it's actually routed through the company in the US. And what a couple of the very big consulting firms have done is shifted the location of the project management teams, so that project management that used to be run out of London is now run out of Paris or Amsterdam, or somewhere that's in the EU, so that all of the subcontracting work that's an intra-company expense involving UK-based employees is not part of the core project. Well, and of course, what that means is that those companies are reducing the number of people that are employed in London and elsewhere in the UK, and increasing the numbers that are employed in Europe, of course.
Yeah, there will be some attrition. Anybody else got any thoughts on questions for Anton around doing business in the EU post January 1? No. Okay, well, if it comes up again, yeah. Sorry, did Stephen raise his hand?
Stephen, yeah.
Hello,
just a
welcome.
question for Anton. Hi. So if we send like a small sample to one of our customers, distributors in Europe, which has no value because they're not going to sell it, they're just using it to show other customers, and it has no end destination, then how would we ship that? What would we declare?
Okay, so when you say it has, okay, the first thing to say to you, everything has a value, and that's really important. Nothing has a zero value. So even if you're sending a sample, let's say, for example, I'm sending a pencil, that pencil will be £10, but it's still that value still needs to be declared as £10. So that's the first thing that you need to make sure of. So when we do an export clearance, for example, on your commercial invoice, we'll ask you to put the words on value is for customs purposes only, not for resale, sample, something like that. So that's the first thing that you need to have on your documentation. We'll do it as a normal import or normal export. So depending on obviously on the size, that'll determine whether we use a courier, whether it's road freight, sea freight. A normal export declaration will be done, and a normal import declaration will be done on the other side. Except because it's of low value, there is a there shouldn't be duties and or taxes to be paid,
right?
Because it is.
Could we put the value at like £1, for instance?
You need to be very realistic with your value, because we've had examples before where someone's put £50 and an Australian customs actually came back and said, yeah, this isn't worth £50. You need to tell us the real value. It was about £1,000. And they ended up being fined because of it. So I'm not sure how Europe is going to react to things like that, but it is really important that that value is a realistic value. Now, if something is worth £100, but it's a sample and you put £70, no one's really going to discriminate, but I can't believe that your sample is worth £1, because I'm sure you sell it for a lot more than that. So it needs to be a realistic value for the sample, but it's a normal import export with an export entry and an import entry over in Europe. Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Doesn't that value question also have implications for insurance purposes?
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, if you're going to insure something, then we need a replacement value. So again, if you are going to insure a sample, not many people do insure samples. Obviously, we don't ship satellites and things like that. But certainly from our point of view, if you are going to insure it, then that insurance value will need to mimic your actual value on your commercial invoice.
Okay. All right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
If the replacement value was, for example, £100, but you're giving the sample to somebody because that's part of what we do, do we still put the value of what it would be? Will we be charged import duty then?
No, because you put that line, you shouldn't be charged import duty, because if you put the line, there is zero values for customs purposes only, no resale value, not for resale. Then generally we're finding that a lot of samples are coming into the UK and are simply just being cleared as 00. So no VAT, no duty.
Okay,
brilliant. Right, thank you. Very good.
Somebody was talking about rule of origin and the percentages that certain goods, and that's quite important that we understand, because there's a lot of people that are being stung with the fact that their customers in Europe are moaning about them having to pay duties because it's coming from the UK. So it's really important to understand your product and understand which part of the rule of origin your product becomes. So for example, if you bring in plastic polymers, just rolls of plastic or whatever, and it's turned into a bottle, well, that bottle will be seen as a UK, although the polymer or the plastic may come from a third country, because you're changing what that product is, i.e. you then manufacturing into a bottle, that becomes wholly UK origin. And then there are, like, I can't remember who it was mentioned, there are certain percentages that will change. So in other words, if you've got 50% of your goods is from China, 50% is from the UK, but you do more work to the product to actually, to put it together, to manufacture it, then actually the UK part becomes bigger than what the actual parts are. So it is important that you understand your product. Your HS code is important. I think it was Lee, you mentioned the DTR or the DIT. There is a website that you can put numbers, you can put names of products in, and it'll sort of give you the starting point for HS codes, and then speak to your friendly freight forwarder on HS codes and also rules of origin, because every good freight forwarder should know what they are and how they are used. The one important thing I will also stress, though, is that this is the only time that a freight forwarder always say, it's not up to us, Gov. because the government, you are solely responsible for your own HS code. So, you know, when you find a HS code, if you're going to use that, you need to remember that HMRC will always check the HS code and will always check the product to see if that's the right HS code.
I think the rules of origin thing explains a lot about what's the urgency behind building EV battery gigafactories in the UK. We've got 1.5 at the moment, and we need about 8 over the next 15 years. But it's because batteries are such a huge part of a car, and because there are so many fewer other parts to the car, that if we don't have batteries made in the UK, we risk our cars being exported, attracting duties, because they too much of them will be made, too much of the value is in the battery. And if we import them, put them in a car, we're not changing the battery in any fundamental way. We're just putting it in the car. It just becomes a component. And that is part of the urgency driving the gigafactory investment that we're all hoping is going to come off very, very soon. We've got 15 minutes left. I did want to touch on the budget. I'm just keen to know, there's an awful lot of chatter at the moment around corporation tax, and people saying, yeah, it's not wise to raise any taxes at this stage of the pandemic. But just notionally, I'm just intrigued to know what the body of the Kirk feels around corporation. I mean, nobody wants to pay more tax, but does a 1% rise over the next 4 years make any sense at all? Is it senseless if we don't get countervailing and balancing increases in capital allowances to encourage investment? What does anybody feel like about this? Who's got some thoughts on it? Yeah, Angela, good evening.
Hiya. Obviously, I'm absolutely against it, having suffered at the hands of the government for the last 11 months because I had a limited company, which I didn't want to set up, but I had to set up in order to get my contract at Jaguar Land Rover. So obviously when we went into lockdown, everybody else has been getting furlough and assistance, and self-employed have had quite a few grants. They've got their 4th grant coming up soon. Limited companies have had no help whatsoever. We've had no grants, we've had no assistance. And there have been so many companies that have gone under. There are so many, you know, I'm a one person. I haven't got employees working for me, and I know of couples who are limited companies and they're having to sell their houses. They can't afford to feed their kids. And I just think it's really unfair that the Chancellor's thinking of putting up corporation tax. He's taxing the very people that he's left lying in the gutter.
That's some of the stories from Excluded, I think is #excluded. If you enter that into Twitter, you'll see some absolutely horrific stories. And there's a book just come out, by the way. It's on my LinkedIn. I think I shared it from old chum mine, Tony Robinson. Mark, you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, just going on from what Angela said. This is a huge debt that we've built up as a country over the past year. I think to think about repaying it back in the next 2, 3, 4 years is just crazy. This is something we've got to try and pay back over the next 20, 30 years. So as Angela said, hitting us hard when we come out of this thing is just crazy. It's going to put so many business out of business. It's a long-term thing. It's you know, no one's fault, but we've got to cope with what we've got. It's long-term, not short-term. Yeah,
I think you'd find no argument about that. I'm intrigued by capital investment. We have a reputation, not a reputation, it's a matter of record that we have not invested in machinery and automation and digitalization anything like as fast as other countries have in recent years and in the past. In my email this evening, earlier today rather, I asked the question whether this was anything to do with tax rates, or whether it's just something in the British psyche that we're just not very good at investing. We don't see its value. I'd like to ask Ewan, because Ewan, you've worked at some very high levels of manufacturing in this country and engineering. What are your thoughts?
Well, my view is that, I mean, I think capital allowances are important, and the government's done quite a lot over the last few years to support, you know, investment in capital infrastructure or capital spending. So I think it's back to almost long-term capital, you know, having the patient capital or long-term capital to support the investment in those in that capital equipment. So it's not just about the tax; it's also about how you're going to fund it. So I sort of would bring that into the equation. I will say something. I mean, look, my view on the government needs to raise taxes, and it's easy to raise taxes from businesses because business don't vote, or businesses don't vote. The people who work for them vote, but then there's a disconnect there. So if they have to tax anything, taxing, I'm going to say corporation profits of corporations, you know, there's a timing, i.e. associated with the fact that, you know, we don't have to pay that tax until we generate a profit, you know, and that's going to be further down the track because none of us are making a profit at the moment because there are very less businesses making a profit. So I suppose if the government's going to tax businesses, what sorts of taxes can it go after? My view is that increasing corporation tax is probably, you know, the better of a number of different evils that it could choose.
Yeah. Out of interest, Simon, in the United States, what's the rate of corporation tax over there? Significantly higher than here, I believe.
I haven't got a clue.
I think it's 27.5%.
I think it is. The one thing I do know is that capital expenditure and tax allowance is very significantly differently managed. There's an awful lot of capital expenditure in the US that can be same year deducted. The depreciation rules, the allowance of what is and isn't tax deductible is significantly higher than in the UK. R&D is also, I think it's either fully or nearly fully tax deductible, which of course, you know, the combination of those two things makes an enormous difference.
Yeah, I think
the mechanisms of distribution of income and what therefore becomes a corporate tax also very, very different. LLCs like mine is a straightforward flow through. My company, I benefit from almost all of the same limited liability laws that you'd expect from a limited company. But as an LLC, the income is operated as if we were a partnership, which means that let's say I made $1 million profit, I could then say that we as a company have determined that $300,000 of that needs to remain in the company as a capital reserve, and the other 700,000 will be distributed. That 700,000 is then distributed equal to the ownership proportions of the members of the partnership, and it's taxed as personal income to those people. So the corporation doesn't pay tax on its profit, basically. I mean, that's what it really boils down to, is you can avoid paying the equivalent of corporation tax. It ends up as personal tax, most of it. And at the same time, if I spend, $100,000 buying new computing equipment, that can be deducted same year.
John Hardwick, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Just experience from many years working in the pharmaceutical industry, the corporation tax compared to places like Singapore and Ireland, there's a reason why all our pharmaceutical bulk materials are made in Singapore and Ireland. It's because of the lower rate of corporation tax, and also the R&D investments are have clawed back in that early stage of manufacture. So putting up corporation tax is, I see it as disincentivizing FDI into the UK, which should be one of the opportunities brought about by leaving Europe, is that there should be more opportunity for foreign investment in the UK. I don't know what actually happened in the end about the level playing field, but if we've got that opportunity, then putting up corporation tax is just going in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned. And the other thing I just want to pick up on, I was looking at the chat, you know, someone said start taxing the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks. I did see a bit of a tangential comment here, but I was really interested in one of the comments I read in one of the trade journals this week about changing the way we do business rates. You know, business rate on premises is becoming an anachronistic way of raising taxes, because so much of it is now clicks and mortar instead of bricks and mortar. So I would be hoping that some nod is given to that in the budget coming up, that they're going to start looking at levelling out the business rates and finding a more equitable way of doing it for the modern economy.
I still struggle to know whether our weak record on investment in this country, and it is undeniably weak, is down to a state of mind, or is down to the fiscal financial system within which we all live and operate. Who here has sort of either postponed investment decisions or seen investment that should have been made that wasn't made? Is it an attitude problem, or is it a money problem?
Well, again, I was looking at the chat that was going on. You know, I think that our business owners don't retain enough profit in the business to be able to invest themselves. They're always taking the money out in dividends or paying the owners, and a much more sensible way of funding investment is to, you know, retain more profit in the business and invest it when that investment makes sense, and then you don't have to raise the capital. But I know Bob would agree, but I'm not sure if many owners would agree.
Yeah, I'm wondering what it's like on the, you know, in other countries. I do understand what you're saying, John. I mean, you know, you see a lot of people living very high off the hog while their companies sort of rather, you know, sort of stagger along behind them. Is it the same in other countries? Do they have the same attitude? I just find this interesting, because I just want to know how we can encourage more investment in this country. And if it's just a question of telling people to stop nicking the money out of the till, well, I'm not sure that that's ever going to work.
In partaker conversations regarding funding, where you apply for funding to get the capital investment, and unfortunately the funding, to get the funding, you have to make the capital investment first anyway. So you've got to stump up the cash and then claim it back after. But the whole point of that is the SME ain't got the cash there to do that in the first place. So that stops it straight off. So buy it up front, give them the cash, let them get invested. Don't do it arse about face.
Yeah, yeah.
Some companies that I worked with in Finland, they were very much incentivized to employ people like me to sell their product for them. And their governments were clearly funding that for quite some time. So you're almost at a competitive disadvantage before if countries start to operate like that. And especially in places like Africa, where the owners are so corrupt, they just take the money out and don't do anything with it. So you've got a problem of corruption around the world that is virtually endemic in every single country, apart from the Western world, and even it still goes on there. So you wonder whether you are on a level playing field when you try and get into other markets, because you're starting off from a disadvantage before you even get going. So you know, if you're going to slap some more corporation tax on these companies that want to grow, that are small companies, medium-sized businesses that want to try and strive to get into these other markets, I think you're putting them at a disadvantage before you even start, you know. So, not so sure, really.
Well, it's coming up to 7, but we've got Sarah and Stephen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you for the first time. Do you want to give us sort of 30 seconds? And Mark Wood also, who's joined us for the first time. Just tell us, you know, a little bit about yourself so that we know, you know, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so we work with manufacturers wherever they are in the world, and we sell and market their products for them. That's what we do.
Yeah, we find them distributors and train and support the distributors in selling the products.
And we work in the mechanical power transmission industry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Belts, couplings.
Well, I do hope we'll see you again. And Mark, good evening to you.
Evening, Nick, and everyone else. Yes, so I'm the Managing Director of Alliance Procurement Solutions. So we work with manufacturing companies basically to build sustainability and resilience into their business through resetting, I suppose, the perception of what procurement is as opposed to what it actually really is. So driving costs, improving risk in their supply chains. We're working on a couple of projects like that now, where we're reshoring stuff for companies and also setting up supply chains for some really exciting projects as well.
Well, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I do hope you'll join us next week, and it's always the same time, Thursdays, 6 p.m, Kaizen Central. Do hope to see you again soon. That's it, everybody. Mrs. P has got a very nice lasagna in the oven, and I intend to go and make hay with it, and no doubt a fine bottle of Malbec as well to go with it. So I'm out of here. Thank you for being with us. Anton, bless you for joining us. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, Anton, I mean, I'll show you how to register and join us again, because it's so wonderful to get new faces, new perspectives. It's what this is all about. So I'll say love you and leave you. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks
Take
a lot.
care. Stay safe.